Mama Eben stood in the center of the village square, her elaborate head wrap casting a sharp shadow across her face as she pointed a bony finger at Igioma. "Look at her," she declared, voice rising above the market chatter. 5 years of marriage, and still flat as a young boy's chest. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, some villagers covering smirks, while others averted their eyes in shame. Igioma's husband placed a protective arm around her shoulders, but remained silent as tears welled in his wife's eyes. "What use is a woman who cannot give her husband children?" Mama Eben continued, her gold bracelets jangling as she gestured dramatically. At 55, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who believed her status as a grandmother elevated her above criticism. "In my day, we knew our purpose was to fill our compounds with sons and daughters. My son already has 3 children. What have you given your husband besides empty promises?" The marketplace grew uncomfortably quiet. The scent of roasting corn and palm oil hung in the air as Mama Eben circled Igioma like a predator. Her wrapper swished against the dusty ground as she moved, scanning the crowd for her next target. Her eyes landed on Ataku, another childless woman who had been married for 7 years. "And you?" She jabbed a finger toward Ataku, who flinched visibly. "How long will your husband's family tolerate your empty womb?" The problem with young women today is they've forgotten what makes a woman valuable. Mama Eben placed her hands on her hips, surveying the crowd with smug satisfaction. Several older women nodded in agreement, emboldening her further. Puffing out her chest, Mama Eben delivered her final blow. "Even at my age, I could still bear a child if I wanted to, unlike these useless vessels walking among us." With that, she turned dramatically and strutted away, leaving Igioma sobbing into her hands while Atticus stared at the ground, shoulders hunched in humiliation. From the shade of the community hall, Chief Dyke watched with a troubled expression. Beside him, an elderly medicine woman clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "Pride comes before a fall," she murmured, her wrinkled hands clutching a walking stick. "That woman's tongue will bring judgment upon her one day." As the crowd dispersed, whispers trailed in Mama Eben's wake. Some remarked on her cruelty, others on her apparent immunity from consequences. No one noticed the medicine woman slipping quietly into the forest, muttering incantations that seemed to make the leaves shiver despite the stillness of the air. 9 months later, thunder cracked over the village as women rushed toward Mama Eben's compound, carrying clean cloths and herbal preparations. The impossible had happened. The 55-year-old grandmother was in labor. Rain pounded the thatched roof as her screams pierced the air, sending nearby children running for cover. "This cannot be natural," whispered the youngest midwife, Kayamika, as she handed bloody cloths to her assistant. A woman her age suddenly with child, after all her boasting. She trailed off as Aneni, the elder midwife, shot her a warning glance. Inside the birthing hut, Mama Eben thrashed on her mat, her arrogance stripped away by pain. Outside, villagers gathered under awnings and trees, speaking in hushed tones about the unseasonable storm that had appeared the moment Mama Eben's labor began. Amaka, her daughter-in-law, paced anxiously, remembering how her mother-in-law had paraded her swollen belly through the marketplace, taking special delight in passing by the women she had mocked. "The gods have blessed me despite my age," she'd proclaimed, eyes gleaming with triumph. "Perhaps they find me more worthy than others." A particularly sharp scream cut through the rainfall, followed by an unnatural silence. Then came a sound no one had ever heard before, a chorus of infant cries, each at a different pitch but somehow synchronized in their unsettling harmony. The door of the birthing hut burst open as Kayamika stumbled out, her face ashen, eyes wide with terror. "Abomination," she gasped, collapsing into the arms of waiting women. The baby has 7 heads." Lightning illuminated the sky as she spoke, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder that seemed to confirm her words. The crowd recoiled in collective horror, some making protective signs against evil, others backing away as if Mama Eben's hut had suddenly become contaminated. And Nenny appeared in the doorway moments later, a bundle clutched in her trembling arms. Rain washed over her as she stood frozen, uncertain what to do with the writhing mass of tiny heads, each with blinking eyes and wailing mouths that created a nightmarish chorus. As if responding to some unspoken command, the crowd parted to let her pass, no one willing to touch or even look directly at what she carried. "It is a sign," declared an elder, his voice barely audible above the storm. "The gods have answered her mockery." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered villagers, many recalling Mama Eben's cruel words to the barren women. Inside the hut, Mama Eben lay exhausted, unaware that her miracle had become a curse, one that would change the village forever. If you are enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up. While you're there, click on the subscribe button and also turn on the bell notification to get notified whenever a new video drops. By sunrise, the storm had passed, but an atmosphere of dread hung over the village like morning mist. Women clustered at the well, exchanging theories in hushed voices. Men gathered under the meeting tree, debating what should be done. Children were kept close to their mothers, forbidden from wandering near Mama Eben's compound where the seven-headed infant's cries could still be heard, each head seeming to wail in a different tongue. "It's punishment," insisted Ataku, one of the women Mama Eben had humiliated. "Remember how she boasted? Even at my age, I could still bear a child if I wanted to." The gods heard her pride and answered with judgment. Several women nodded, though they kept their voices low. Despite her current predicament, Mama Eben still commanded fear in the village. Chief Dyke called an emergency meeting, the village elders gathering under the ancient Irako tree. "We must proceed carefully," he cautioned, leaning heavily on his staff. "Our ancestors speak of unusual births that brought both curses and blessings. Until we understand the meaning, we should not act hastily." But whispers persisted throughout the day, growing louder as families barred their doors earlier than usual that evening. Inside her hut, Mama Eben sat rigid on her sleeping mat, staring at the grotesque infant beside her. Her initial horror had transformed into a strange, defensive pride. "They've always been jealous of me," she muttered, watching the seven heads move independently, each with its own expression. "Now they fear me even more." Sometimes the heads seemed to communicate with each other through coos and gurgles that made her skin crawl, but she refused to show weakness. As night fell deeper, an eerie hush blanketed the village. Dogs whined uneasily, refusing to settle. Babies cried without apparent reason. Then, just after midnight, it began, whispers that seemed to carry through the air, childlike voices reciting names and secrets. "Ataku poison." The first voice was soft but clear, causing the named woman to bolt upright in bed, heart pounding. How could anyone know she had once contemplated poisoning her husband's second wife? "Chikuri, the stolen goat." Another tiny voice continued, revealing the butcher's decades-old crime that had funded his first shop. "Nkem, the hidden body." A third voice exposed the terrible secret of a woman who had buried her stillborn child without proper rites. One by one, the seven mouths spoke into the night, revealing sins both petty and profound. Each revelation was met with a cry of anguish from somewhere in the village as people recognized their darkest moments being exposed. No one was spared. The teacher who had beaten a child too severely, the farmer who had moved boundary stones under cover of darkness, the wife who had sought forbidden love potions. By dawn, the village lay in terrified silence, neighbors eyeing each other with newfound suspicion. The seven-headed infant had planted seeds of doubt and fear that threatened to destroy the community from within, and Mama Eben, listening to the whispers from inside her hut, began to understand the true power she now possessed. The morning brought chaos to a community built on secrets. The village square, usually a place of commerce and conversation, became a scene of accusation and violence. "Thief!" shouted a man, pointing at the butcher Chikwudi. The child spoke truth. "You stole my father's prize goat 30 years ago." Before he could defend himself, others joined in, questioning how his business had truly begun. Nearby, a woman was dragged from her home by her husband, his face contorted with rage. "The child revealed your betrayal," he shouted as their children watched in horror. "The second son is not mine." The woman's pleas fell on deaf ears as decades of trust crumbled in an instant. From her doorway, Mama Eben watched with an unsettling smile playing on her lips. The seven-headed infant rested in her arms, its multiple gazes taking in the scene with unnatural awareness. For the first time since her public mockery of the barren women, Mama Eben felt truly powerful. Those who had whispered behind her back, those who had questioned her worth in her old age, they were now the ones being humiliated, exposed, broken. "See how they fall," she whispered to the infant, whose heads turned toward her voice in perfect synchronicity before resuming their independent movements. "Each one who ever looked down on me now bows before our power." By midday, the village had descended into complete disorder. A home near the edge of the settlement had been set ablaze after its owner was accused of witchcraft. The smell of burning thatch mingled with sweat and fear. Families who had lived peacefully for generations barricaded their doors, some fleeing into the surrounding forest. Across the square, Ijeoma stood quietly observing the madness. Unlike others, she had not been named by the infants' mouths, giving her a strange clarity amidst the chaos. Her eyes repeatedly returned to Mama Eben, noting the older woman's satisfaction, the way she seemed to relish each fresh outbreak of violence. As the sun began to descend, casting long shadows across the ravaged village, something unexpected happened. One of the infants had suddenly turned toward Mama Eben, its tiny features contorting into an expression no newborn should possess. Its mouth opened, and unlike the night's whispers, this voice rang out clearly. "Eben, the dead baby you buried behind the yam barn." The words hung in the air as nearby villagers froze, turning toward the source. The other heads joined in, each revealing a different secret. "Eben, the husband you poisoned with cassava roots." Mama Eben's triumphant smile vanished. The baby in her arms suddenly felt heavy, burning against her skin. She tried to silence the seven mouths, but they only grew louder. "Eben, the curses you paid for. Eben, the lies you told." "Lies," she shrieked, but terror filled her eyes. The tide of village rage, which had been directed at neighbors just moments before, began turning toward her. The instrument of judgment she had wielded with such satisfaction was now pronouncing sentence on its own creator. Night descended on the village like a funeral shroud. Torches illuminated grim faces as the entire community gathered before Mama Eben's compound. No longer were they turning on each other. Their collective fury had found its true target. The woman who had mocked the Baron, who had flaunted her impossible pregnancy, who had watched with satisfaction as the community tore itself apart, now found herself facing unified judgment. "Bring her out." The demand echoed through darkness, voiced by dozens of throats. Inside her hut, Mama Eben clutched the seven-headed infant, its continuous revelations now a damning testimony against her. Each tiny mouth took turns exposing her lifetime of cruelty, the newborn she had buried decades ago because it had been born with a clubfoot, the slow poison she had mixed into her aging husband's soup, the curses she had paid a witch doctor to place on women who had offended her. When her door finally splintered under the assault of angry fists, Mama Eben found herself facing not the village men, but Ijeoma and the other women she had humiliated. "You," Mama Eben gasped, clutching the infant tighter. "You have no right." "We have every right," Ijeoma interrupted, her voice steady, devoid of the fear that had once made it tremble. "The mouth that mocked has birthed the mouths that judge. Your own creation condemns you." Strong hands seized Mama Eben, dragging her into the night. The seven-headed baby was carefully taken by Eneni, who wrapped it despite its unnatural form. The procession moved toward the forest, torches lighting their way as Mama Eben's pleas turned to screams. "Please, I am an old woman. Show mercy." But her cries fell on ears that remembered all too well how she had shown no mercy to others in their vulnerability. Her legs gave way, forcing villagers to drag her through dirt, her once proud wrapper becoming soiled and torn. They reached a clearing where a pyre had been constructed, wood gathered from 7 different trees, one for each head that had revealed the village's sins and, ultimately, Mama Eben's own. As they bound her to the central post, the 7-headed infant, now held by Ijeoma, began to speak again in clear, ringing tones. If you're enjoying this video, please give it a like. While you're there, click on the subscribe button and also turn on the bell notification to get notified whenever a new video drops. "Justice comes in many forms," said one head. "As does judgment," continued another. "You judged others for their emptiness," said a third. "While hiding the rot within yourself," finished a fourth. Flames leapt from the torches to the carefully arranged wood. Mama Eben's screams rose above the crackling fire as the 7 mouths called her name in unison, their voices merging with the blaze. Villagers stood in a silent circle, faces illuminated by the growing inferno, watching as the woman who had brought them to this point of destruction was consumed by judgment's fire. In a final, terrible moment, as flames reached their peak, many would later swear they saw the infant's 7 heads merge into one, normal, innocent, finally at peace, before fire claimed them both completely. Dawn broke over a village forever changed. Homes would be rebuilt, apologies exchanged, forgiveness sought and given. The story of the grandmother who mocked barren women only to give birth to a 7-headed baby became a cautionary tale passed through generations, a reminder that pride and cruelty invite their own unique form of justice. And Ijeoma, who had led the procession of judgment, discovered her belly swelling with new life just as the village began healing its wounds, proof, some said, that compassion could create miracles that cruelty never could.